Little did she know that this decision would change her life. The iron gate stood like a judgment throne, tall and silent, gleaming under the morning sun. Atop it, the words Hawthorne Elite Range glinted like the edge of a well-polished blade. Harper Lane stepped out of the dusty pickup truck, her mother still called Old Girl, and faced the fortress of privilege. The truck's engine ticked with heat behind her. The wind carried a faint scent of gunpowder, cedarwood, and something colder, like steel arrogance. She adjusted the canvas bag on her shoulder. Inside was a rifle older than she was, wooden stock, iron sights, no scope. Her father's gun. The last thing he left her besides scars and stories. A security guard approached. Grey uniform, gold badge, sunglasses that mirrored the gravel under her feet. He didn't say a word, just looked her up and down like she was a weed in a rose garden. Name, he finally asked. Harper Lane. He blinked. Lane? Yes. He stared for another second. Identification. She handed him her father's. Old military ID, laminated and frayed. Along with the official invitation to today's open qualifier. He studied them. His jaw tensed. You're that Lane? Guess I am. He said nothing as he stepped aside and buzzed her in. The gates hissed open like the breath of a giant predator. The entrance to Hawthorne felt more like a luxury resort than a shooting range. Marble columns, digital displays, polished hardwood floors. A drone hovered silently above, live-streaming arrivals. People dressed in tailored shooting jackets, sunglasses worth more than Harper's entire wardrobe, sipped cold brew in champagne flutes. She walked through like a ghost. Heads turned. A ripple of disbelief spread. Whispers, scoffs, laughter trying to hide behind sunglasses. Who invited the janitor? Maybe she's here to clean the stalls. Looks like she borrowed that rifle from a museum. Harper ignored them all. She had thicker skin than their daddy paid for Gucci belts. Her boots clicked steadily against the tile as she headed to registration. The receptionist was a blonde woman in a velvet blue blazer. Her smile dropped the second she saw Harper's calloused hands, sunburnt skin, and duffel bag. Can I help? You? Harper Lane, I'm registered for the 10 a.m. qualifier, Tier 1 group. The woman laughed. Tier 1? Sweetheart, that's for... She glanced down at her screen. Her smile froze. Never mind. She handed Harper a badge without another word. Her fingers shook a little. Ma'am, Lane 4, indoor precision range. The arena was cathedral-sized, every inch built for spectacle. Glass-walled shooting lanes, 500-foot precision targets, holographic analytics projected in real time. And there, at the far end, surrounded by cameras and admirers, stood Ethan Cole, Golden Boy, multi-time national champion, sponsored by no less than 7 weapon tech companies. His rifle had AI-assisted aiming, his shooting glasses had HUD readouts. His followers numbered in the millions. He saw her, then smirked. Nice of you to show up, he said loudly so others could hear. Wasn't sure they'd let wildlings through the gate. People laughed. Vanessa Truitt, his equally rich and venomous girlfriend, held up her phone and started streaming. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced to her followers, say hello to Harper Dust and Rust Lane. More laughter. Harper said nothing. Ethan stepped forward, leaned close. You don't belong here, he whispered. This place eats people like you. She met his eyes, steady and cold. Then let's see how good it chews. She stepped into lane 4. The floor vibrated faintly as the system powered up. A digital voice announced her name. Harper Lane, shooter number 47, qualifier. Match precision tier. Target distance 500 feet. Wind resistance simulation activated. Time limit 60 seconds per shot. 10 shots. The camera drone zoomed in. Harper. Placed the rifle on the rest. Exhaled slowly and remembered the first time she shot this gun. She was 9. The sky was purple with dusk. Her father's voice was the only sound in the forest. Breathe through your belly. Feel the wind. Squeeze. Don't yank. 10 seconds on the clock. She closed one eye, centered the sight. The world fell silent. Bang. 10. The announcer's voice rang out, surprised. The murmurs returned. This time, quieter. Second shot. 10.0. Third. 10.0. By the fifth shot, the laughter had stopped. By the seventh, people were recording silently. By the ninth, Ethan's jaw was clenched so tight it could have snapped. 10th shot. Final breath. 1. Pull 10-point draw. A perfect score. The drone hovered, stunned. The room exploded, not with cheers, but with disbelief. No one had expected it, least of all Ethan. Vanessa's live stream comments blew up. Holy shit. Who is she? Lane? Like the Colonel? She's better than Ethan. Harper stepped out of the booth. No smile, no celebration. Just the old rifle on her shoulder and the steady beat of boots against tile. The gate might have opened like a trap this morning, but she walked out like the beginning of a storm. The only thing louder than a perfect score was the silence that followed it. Harper walked down the corridor behind the range, past the digital leaderboard now flashing her name in second place, just below Ethan Cole's all-time record, and above everyone. Hills? Her bag thumped against her shoulder. The old rifle squeaked in its sling. That was the only sound she allowed. She could feel their eyes on her, burning between disbelief and contempt. Behind her, Vanessa's voice floated down the hall. Second place, folks. Not bad. For a ghost. Another burst of laughter. She didn't turn around. Didn't give Vanessa the satisfaction of a reaction. Harper had learned years ago, people like that only fed on your flinch. She turned left into the locker room, locked the door behind her, and exhaled. For the first time all morning, she allowed herself to sit. The wood bench creaked. Her fingers trembled just slightly as she unlaced her boots. The adrenaline was fading, and behind it came the memory, like it always did, of the shot that changed everything. 12 years ago. 1 bullet, 1 funeral. 1. Name that could get you banned from 1,000 places. Lane. Her father wasn't a mystery to the shooting world. He was a cautionary tale. Colonel Reuben Lane, war hero, Olympic qualifier, sniper legend. He could hit a moving target at 800 yards. In wind and rain, eyes half closed. Some people said he could see the curvature of the earth through iron sights. He also drank bourbon like it was water. He also punched his commanding officer in 2008. He also killed a man in a parking lot brawl outside a local range on a Tuesday afternoon with 1 shot. Self-defense, the jury ruled. Murder, the public said. Reuben Lane vanished shortly after the trial, officially retired, unofficially disgraced. Harper was 16 when she watched his reputation burn. She hadn't picked up the rifle for years after that. The old man had taught her to shoot at age 8, and by 12 she was competing in county-level matches, sweeping podiums with nothing more than instinct and a steady hand. But after the trial, no one wanted that girl around. Coaches turned their backs. Judges whispered to one another when her name showed up on sign-up sheets. Once, at a regional competition, someone sabotaged her trigger with epoxy. The gun misfired. She got disqualified. The judge's daughter took the trophy. She stopped competing after that. Her mother, a nurse, tried to steer her toward normal things. Biology, track, theater, anything that didn't involve bullets or brass, but it was in her blood. The rhythm, the breath, the quiet between heartbeats. Now here she was, back in the lion's den. Hawthorne, the shrine of the elite. Her name back on the scoreboard, and every camera lens sharpening like a knife. She leaned forward and let her head rest against her locker. There was a photo inside. She kept it there out of some sick, aching loyalty. Her and her dad, covered in dirt, sweat, and smiles. He was teaching her how to clean the rifle after a weekend hunt. Her fingers were stained with gun oil. His eyes still had life in them. Back then, no one was afraid to say their name. A knock came at the door. 3 sharp raps. Harper didn't move. Another. Pause, then a familiar voice. "Open up, Harper, it's me." She stood, twisted the lock. The door creaked open to reveal Julian Vega, former champion, now coach for Hawthorne's Tier 1 juniors. Salt and pepper beard, steely brown eyes, a limp from a hunting accident that was, according to rumor, a lot less accidental than people thought. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "You shot clean," he said. Harper shrugged. "Didn't come to miss." "I saw the board." He studied her, arms crossed. Then, after a long pause, "You shouldn't be here." Her jaw tightened. "So I've heard. You're lighting matches in a powder keg." "I'm not here to make friends, Julianne." "No," he said. "You're here to haunt someone." That stopped her cold. He sat beside her, groaning slightly as he lowered himself onto the bench. "I trained with your father once," he said. "Back in Arizona. He was sharp, raw, gifted, but he carried something inside him that wouldn't let him rest." Harper stared straight ahead. "Is this a warning?" "No, this is a question." He leaned in. "What are you carrying, Harper?" She didn't answer. Not with words. Instead, she pulled the canvas bag onto her lap and opened it. Inside, among the cleaning rags and gun oil, was a folded letter. She handed it to him. Julian unfolded it slowly. Read the top line. His eyes went sharp. "You kept this and never let it go." The letter was postmarked 5 days before Reuben Lane's death. It was scrawled in his unmistakable, messy hand, faded, but still legible. "Harper, if you're reading this, I'm gone. They'll say a lot of things, let them. I've done things I can't take back, and the world doesn't forgive easy. But you've got something I never had, a second chance. That gun of mine, it was never meant to be a weapon. It was meant to be a compass. Use it, find the truth. And if you're brave enough, redeem our name. Love, Dad." Julian read it twice, then folded it carefully and handed it back. "I'm not here to haunt anyone," Harper finally said. "I'm here to finish something, not for him, for me." The coach nodded slowly. "I'll be watching," he said, standing up. "Just don't mistake vengeance for purpose." As he limped to the door, he paused. "One more thing," he said, looking over his shoulder. "You're in the wild card. Round now, you'll be facing Cole again next week." Harper nodded. "Good," he smiled. "Try not to burn the place down." She stayed in the locker room for a while after he left, tracing the edge of the photo with her thumb, staring at the rifle case at her feet. Outside, the screens kept flashing her name. Rumors already spread like wildfire. Commentators on Hawthorne TV were debating whether her score was a fluke, a threat, or something worse. But Harper didn't care about the noise. She'd crossed the gate. She had one shot left, and she wasn't going to miss it. The ballroom was a trap. Harper knew it the second she walked in. Every chandelier sparkled like a sniper scope. Every flute of champagne bubbled with poison. Every handshake was loaded, the Hawthorne Invitational mixer, a black tie event meant to celebrate excellence among the world's most elite sharpshooters. In reality, it was a battlefield without rifles. She stepped into the grand room wearing a simple black dress and combat boots. She wasn't there to impress. She was there to observe. Around her, the top names in competitive shooting, Olympians, prodigies, weapons heiresses, moved like predators in couture. They laughed, toasted, and traded war stories over imported wine. But Harper could see the calculation behind their eyes. This was a game of power, and Harper Lane was the wild card they didn't invite, just tolerated. A waiter passed by. She grabbed a soda, ignored the champagne, and leaned against a marble pillar. She scanned the room. Ethan Cole stood near the stage, surrounded by a cluster of admirers. Sharp jawline, tailored tucks, easy arrogance. His hand rested on the shoulder of Vanessa DuPont, who looked like she'd walked off a billboard in Paris, but spoke like a military-grade gossip machine. Vanessa's eyes found Harper across the room. She didn't smile. She whispered something to Ethan, who barely reacted, but Harper caught the flicker in his gaze, recognition, and something colder. "Nice boots," came a voice beside her. Harper turned. It was Alina Kovac, the Croatian phenom, with a silver streak in her braid and a reputation for putting bullets through dimes at 600 meters. She was in a dark red dress, holding a martini glass like it was part of her arsenal. "I like a girl who comes to a ball dressed for a war," Alina said with a smirk. Harper nodded. "I wasn't sure if this was a competition or a costume party." Alina laughed. "Both, darling, but only one ends with a trophy." They clinked glasses, soda against vodka. Alina leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "You made a lot of noise with that score." "Didn't mean to." "Yes, you did. But don't worry. I like noise. Keeps the snakes nervous." Harper tilted her head. "You think they're snakes?" Alina's smile vanished. "No, I know they are." Just then the lights dimmed. A man in a navy suit walked onto the stage, holding a microphone. Judge Remington Hawthorne, the founder of the Invitational, former intelligence officer, and billionaire whose name the Academy bore. His hair was white, his presence magnetic, his smile as polished as the steel in his holster. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "what a pleasure to see so many legends and rising stars in one room." The crowd erupted in applause. Harper didn't clap. "This year's competition," Hawthorne continued, "is shaping up to be one of the most thrilling in our history. But remember, this isn't just about accuracy. It's about honor, character, legacy." He paused, his eyes sweeping the crowd, and locking for a beat too long on Harper. She felt the weight of it. The crowd didn't notice, but she did. Hawthorne continued, "To those of you new to our family, welcome. To those returning, may the best shot win, and remember, we're always watching." Another round of polite applause. The wolves smiled and raised their glasses. After the speech, the masks came. Off not literally, but in posture, in glances, in sudden silences, when Harper approached a cluster of shooters. She wandered toward the back patio for air. That's where she found Julian Vega, standing alone, drink untouched, staring out at the garden beyond. "I hate mixers," he muttered as she approached. "Same," Harper said. He looked at her, studied her expression. "You holding up?" "Define holding." He smiled faintly. "If they weren't afraid of you, they wouldn't stare so hard." "They're not staring. They're aiming." "That too." He hesitated. "Word is Hawthorne's team pulled your registration papers twice this morning. Legal tried to block your wild card on a technicality." "And?" "I shut it down," Harper raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because you earned your slot, and because this game needs a little truth." He glanced back at the party. "But be careful. They don't play fair in the dark." Back inside, Harper crossed the room toward the exit. When she felt a presence, behind her Ethan Cole. He walked up calm as a jungle cat. "You're fast," he said. Harper didn't stop. "So are landmines." Ethan stepped in front of her, forcing her to meet his gaze. "I remember your father." Harper froze. Ethan's smile was unreadable. "He beat my coach once. No one talks about that match, but I remember. He was brutal, clean, cold." Harper kept her voice flat. "Is this your idea of intimidation?" "No." Ethan leaned closer. "It's a warning. Some names open doors, others leave bodies in them." He walked away without another word. That night, Harper sat alone in her dorm suite, rifle pieces spread across the table like a puzzle. She cleaned them in silence, oiled every part, checked the balance, loaded the letter from her father back into its case. Outside, the wind howled. She whispered to the rifle like an old friend. "They're watching." And smiled. Good. The kill line was where legends lived and where reputations died, 100 meters long. Targets ranged from steel plates to simulated hostage takedowns. Precision, speed, composure under fire. And today, it was Harper's turn. She stood in her lane, the morning fog still curling along the edges of the range like smoke from a battlefield. Her heart thudded once, then again, and then it stopped trying to run away. She forced it to obey. Control the rhythm, control the breath, control the shot. Across the field, the crowd filtered in. VIPs in high-end tactical gear, coaches holding score tablets, contestants masked by sunglasses and ambition, the commentators. Voice crackled over the loudspeaker. "Next up on Lane 6, Harper Lane, wildcard, unranked, unmatched so far." A few chuckles from the sidelines. Harper ignored them. She adjusted her scope, adjusted her soul. First shot, 300 millimeters, steel disc. 5 seconds, click, bang, ping, direct hit, center mass. Clean shot from Lane 6, she didn't smile. Second shot, 200 millimeters, hostage split. 2 silhouettes, 1 civilian in white, 1 target in black. She fired once. The black figure spun, white untouched, perfect split. The judge blinked. Confirmed. No collateral. 3 more targets fell like dominoes. Precision, flow, focus. Each one brought more silence from the sea. Crowd, not applause, not cheers. Fear a girl who wasn't supposed to be here was taking their future apart 1 round at a time. Then came the 6th challenge, moving dual targets, opposing directions, unpredictable speeds. The buzzer sounded. Harper lined up the first, tracked, bang, swung right, tracked, bang, both down before they crossed the halfway mark. It was surgical, like she'd seen the math behind their paths before they moved. She exhaled, lowered, her weapon. Then, the scream. A sharp cry cut through the range. Judges turned. Contestants froze. Harper didn't move. Her training kicked in. It came from Lane 2. The shooter there, Marcus Lee, a former British Special Forces marksman, had dropped his rifle. His hands were shaking, his head tilted, and he was muttering. Something over and over. I can see it, I can see it. Blood dripped from his nose. Harper rushed forward before the staff could stop her. Don't touch him, one medic shouted. But she was already there. Marcus's eyes rolled back. He collapsed, twitching, seizing, then still. Total silence. Minutes later, the event was shut down. Hushed murmurs passed through the elite crowd like a virus. Paramedics wheeled Marcus away. Officials whispered. Phones buzzed. Julian Vega pulled Harper aside, his voice low. That wasn't dehydration. I've seen this before. Harper looked at him sharply. Where? He hesitated, then answered. Iraq. 2011. Our sniper unit. Someone fed one of us a neuro trigger. It mimics heat stroke, but shuts down vision centers first. Then it causes seizures. We lost 3 before command figured it out. Her blood chilled. Someone drugged him? Or tested something on him? Harper narrowed her eyes. You think it's connected to the Invitational? Julian's jaw clenched. I think this isn't just a game anymore. That night, a message slipped under Harper's door. It was typed. No name, no fingerprints, just 4 words. You're next, run. Harper didn't sleep. Not because of the message, not because she was afraid, but because for the first time in years, something felt too familiar. She recognized the patterns. The silence after a warning. The way the world stood still before it fell apart, just like the night her father disappeared. At 4:13 a.m., Harper was at her desk in the competition dorms, laptop cracked open, VPN bouncing her location across 3 continents. She accessed the military archives under her old credentials. What was left of them? She typed her father's codename, Spectre 12. A red alert blinked back. Access revoked, classified level Alpha. Her jaw tightened. Of course, she muttered. But Harper wasn't trying to open the front door. She knew the side tunnels. She plugged in a USB key. It wasn't hers. It had belonged to a dead man named Lieutenant Grazer, who used to work with her father in Joint Task Force Echo. Harper had pulled the device from his locker after his funeral. Just intuition. Tonight, it paid off. The drive unlocked a ghost directory. Something hidden deep in the system's logic. One file untitled, no metadata. She clicked. It opened to a single surveillance. Image, time-stamped, September 14th, 2017, 22:02:07, the night her father vanished. He was in uniform, weapon slung, standing next to another man, someone she didn't recognize, but it wasn't the man that stopped her breath. It was the location. Behind them, scorched earth. Burnt-out tanks, a shattered wall with 2 painted letters, VX, she whispered it like a curse, a VX compound. Syria. The name was erased from maps, covered in black ink and silence. The last known site of a failed biochemical experiment, one that never officially happened, but now she had proof. Her father was there and he wasn't alone. Sunlight cracked the edge of the horizon when a knock shattered her focus. Not a polite knock, a code knock. 3 short, 1 long. 2 short. She reached for her pistol but didn't draw. She opened the door a crack. Julian Vega stood there, coat slung over his shoulder, backpack on. Pack your things, he said, without waiting for permission. We're leaving. Harper stepped aside, letting him in. Where? Off-grid. Somewhere no one's tracking. What did you find? Vega tossed a tablet onto her bed. It displayed the Invitational's competitor health scans. Someone rewired the biometric chips, he said. Every contestant's blood is being monitored for neurochemical reactions in real time, including you. Harper frowned. That's not in the contract. It's not even in the building's schematics. She glanced at him. Someone's running a side experiment. And Lee was the first test subject, Vega said. But not the last. He hesitated, then added, they're scanning for fear responses, fight or flight, aggression under pressure, but also compliance. Harper blinked. Like behavior conditioning? He nodded. Or control. A cold realization dropped into her gut like lead. This isn't a competition, she whispered. No, Vega said. It's a recruitment funnel. They left through the service tunnels, past the vendors, past the sleeping guards, through a back gate she'd mapped on day one. By 7:04 a.m., they were in a stolen black SUV with no plates, barreling down a back road that led into the hills outside. The city. That's when Harper's phone buzzed. A blocked number, she answered. A synthetic voice whispered in her ear, VX wasn't a failure. It was a prototype. Your father knew. You should have let him die unknown. Turn back, Harper, or follow him into the grave. Then, click. No trace. No callback. She stared into the mountains ahead, the rising sun blinding her vision. Then, without emotion, she muttered, drive faster. Later that day, they hid in a safe house Vega kept under a false identity, registered under the name of a Chilean agricultural firm. No cameras, no digital access, no questions. Harper lay awake. The image of her father on the screen burned into her mind, the man next to him, the symbol in the background, and now the voice. She opened her notebook and wrote down 5 names, each one a competitor in the Invitational. Each one had military clearance. Each one had a family history tied to Black Ops units. Harper didn't believe in coincidences anymore. She circled one name, Cameron Wexler. She remembered him from the range. Cool under pressure. No mistakes, and the only contestant who didn't flinch when Marcus Lee collapsed. Harper stared at his name for a long time, then whispered, "You're not here to win. You're here to choose who survives." The room was sealed, lead-lined. Walls, no cameras, no mics, no comms. And yet Harper could hear everything. The hum of machines beyond steel, the pulse in her temples, and the question that refused to leave her brain. Why is my father's mind still alive in this place? Getting back into the Invitational compound was suicide. But Harper wasn't going in through the front door. She and Vega had identified a back entry route used for medical waste disposal, lead-shielded bins removed by unmarked trucks every 72 hours. Enough space for a human. If curled like a corpse, Vega had insisted he go instead. Harper said no. He was my father. Now, under the stench of bleach and synthetic blood packs, Harper waited inside a rolling medical crate marked Biohazard Disposal Protocol 9B. At precisely 2:17 a.m., the crate was wheeled down a concrete ramp and parked in a chilled corridor. She held her breath as the footsteps faded. 30 seconds later, she popped the latch, slipped out, and pressed against the wall. No cameras here, just cold silence. She slipped past the first 2 intersections into an unmarked hallway with doors that looked like morgue fridges. Then there it was, a single keypad unlabeled, no retinal scan, just numeric. Harper entered 1974, her father's birth year. The door unlocked. The lab was unlike anything she'd seen. 10 cylindrical chambers, each with a humanoid mannequin inside, wearing visors that covered their entire heads like elongated VR helmets. Tubes ran from the back of the helmets to a massive data rig blinking with red lights. Harper crossed to the terminal. A login screen blinked. No password needed. Grazer's USB bypassed it. She navigated the file tree. Project Phantom. A single folder pulsed like a heartbeat. Neural synth. Echo 12, she opened it. Audio crackled through the terminal. Her father's voice. Harper, if you're hearing this, it means I failed. They turned us into weapons, not soldiers, not men weapons. Project Phantom wasn't about building elite snipers. It was about removing what makes them human. Pain, fear, morality. We were tested with neural rewiring, real-time brainwave feedback. Then, they harvested the survivors. Harper's eyes widened. He wasn't talking about training. He was talking about uploading consciousness. She scanned the files, EKG readings, brainwave maps, reflex response times. But what chilled her was the final entry. Subject Echo 12 status, active, simulation loop, 1,108 cycles. Her father was still alive, digitally, stuck inside a simulation loop that had repeated over 2 million times. A simulation of combat, of kill or be killed forever. The lights above her flickered, an alarm chirped once, then silence. Harper froze. She wasn't alone. From the far side of the lab, a voice spoke. "You weren't supposed to see this." She turned slowly. Cameron Wexler stood there, no gun drawn, just watching her like a predator that had already won. "I figured you'd find it," he said. "After all, you're the only one here not pretending to be someone else." She reached slowly toward her hip. He raised a finger. "I wouldn't," he said. "There's no live ammo down here. Magnetic field scramble powder ignition. Of course, control safety cleanup protocols." Wexler stepped closer, glancing at the terminal. "So," he said. "Now you know." Harper's voice cracked. "He's alive. You're keeping him alive for training purposes?" Wexler shrugged. "Alive is a strong word. Think of him as the operating system. Every sniper in this tournament is being scored based on how closely their decisions match his." Harper's hands clenched. "You're scoring human beings on how well they mimic a broken ghost in a loop." Wexler stepped even closer. "Your father wasn't broken. He was perfected. Until he chose to betray the program. You should be proud. I want his mind pulled out of that loop," she snapped. Wexler smiled faintly. "Then win." Harper blinked. "Win the invitational," he said. "Get to the final 5. The ones who get clearance. You'll have access to the core simulation lab. Then maybe you can unplug him yourself." Then he turned, walked toward the exit, paused. "Oh, and Harper, if you try to expose this, we'll say it was all a delusion, a psychotic break, like your dad." He left. The door hissed shut. Back at the safe house, Harper sat on the floor, wrapped in silence. Vega stared at her from across the room. "What did they do to him?" he asked softly. "They digitized him," she whispered. "They're using him as a baseline, like a digital ghost that teaches the perfect kill." She opened her palm, revealing a small chip. "I stole a copy of his loop." Vega's eyes widened. "You're going to simulate him?" "No," Harper said. "I'm going to free him." "How?" She stared out the window. The sun hadn't risen yet, but it would. "I'm going back into the game," she said. "To win." Harper shook her head. "To burn it down." The final stage of the invitational was here. Harper felt the weight of the arena press down on her. The first few rounds had been tactical, designed to test precision and reflex. But the final rounds, they were something else, designed to break the player. It was a game of moral dilemmas, psychological warfare, and tracking who could hold their composure under the most impossible conditions. As the countdown ticked down, Harper found herself locked in the dark inside the simulation chamber, a cage of metal, thick glass, and blackened walls. The game room's edges blurred like a haze of white static. The illusion was perfect, the virtual world indistinguishable from the real one. Her father's image echoed through the dark. "You'll break. They'll make sure of it. Everyone has their breaking point." Her fingers tightened around the trigger in her hand. The simulation started. Objective: survive. The landscape was a war-torn city, buildings half crumbled, smoke rising. The distant wail of sirens cut through the deafening silence. But this wasn't just about surviving the environment. It was a hunt. Other competitors, each equipped with advanced neural combat systems, tracked her every move. They knew her strategy, anticipated her weaknesses. But there was something more in the air today. Something off. Her father's voice whispered in her mind. "Don't trust the simulation, Harper. It's testing you, not them." As she crouched behind a wall, her comm unit buzzed to life. Vega's voice. "Harper, you're not alone. There's something strange in the system. We've traced an anomaly. A competitor. He's not like the rest. We can't track him. He's pulling off moves that shouldn't be possible." Harper's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, impossible?" "He's glitching in and out of the simulation. It's like he's faster than the system can process. He's breaking the rules. Harper's instincts kicked in. Find him, I need a visual. He's already on you. Her breath caught in her throat. He was close. Through the haze, something shifted. A blur of motion. Harper darted to the side, drawing. Her weapon as her eyes scanned the horizon. The city felt alive, more than it should. She moved quickly, trying to stay ahead, her mind racing through possible scenarios. Every move, every second mattered now. Then the sound of footfalls echoed too fast, too precise. She spun, her gun raised. He was there, the figure before her. Wasn't like the others. No flashy armor, no logo, no tracking code. Just an outline of blackened figure in the haze, his movements disjointed, almost glitching, the kind of distortion you saw when the system tried to render something it couldn't. Process, he grinned at her, no fear. Just cold calculation. Harper pulled the trigger. Click, her gun jammed, and before she could react, he was on her. Fast. Too fast. She swung her elbow, but it barely connected. His hand snapped out, seizing her wrist and twisting with terrifying precision. Her breath hitched as he slammed her against the concrete wall. The pain shot through her, but her instinct screamed, fight. With a brutal twist, she freed her arm and pivoted into a defensive crouch. But he was already moving, sliding just out of her reach. Not bad. His voice was low, smooth like venom. But you're not ready for this game. Harper's pulse raced. There was something familiar about his voice, something she couldn't place. Then he tilted his head. I know you, Harper. Her blood froze. Who the hell are you? She demanded. He smirked, raising a hand in front of him. A moment later, the surrounding cityscape distorted, rippling as though the world itself was bending around them. A deep hum filled the air. I was the first, he said softly. Before you. Before all of them. Suddenly, it clicked. He wasn't another competitor. He wasn't human anymore. He was a prototype. Subject Echo 12, Harper whispered. His smile widened. The one. And only, she shook her head. You can't be, you're alive in a sense. He lifted his hand again and the environment flickered once more. A wave of static ran through the air, distorting his form. They made me like you, or at least they tried. But I broke the cycle. Harper stepped back, calculating her options. Echo 12 wasn't a competitor. He wasn't even a man anymore. He was the perfected weapon, the one who had been pushed beyond human limits and trapped in a simulation loop. But somehow, he had evolved, and now he was here, hunting her. How did you escape? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Echo 12 tilted his head again, his grin sharpening. I didn't escape, he said. I adapted, and you will too, when you're ready. With a final flick of his wrist, he was gone, vanishing into the mist like a shadow in the code. Back in the safe house, Vega was waiting, eyes wide. Harper, what the hell was that? She took a deep breath. He's the one, she said, her voice steady, but deep down she knew they were past the point of no return. Echo 12, the first subject of the project, and now he's hunting us. Vega paused, his eyes darkening with concern. Then we need to prepare. The game wasn't just a tournament anymore, it was a war. Harper stood still, the echoes of Echo 12's cryptic words still ringing in her ears. He wasn't just some rogue player, he wasn't even human in the way they understood it. Whatever he had become was beyond the realm of the system's control, something darker, something far more dangerous. Vega was already at the monitor, scanning every piece of data he could find on the simulation's internal systems. His fingers flew across the keyboard, desperately searching for a solution, but Harper knew better. This wasn't something that could be solved with technology alone. Have you found anything? Harper asked, her voice tight. Vega didn't look up. There's no official record of Echo 12, he muttered, eyes flicking over the streams of code. Nothing in the system. It's like he was erased, completely wiped from all logs. But there are these strange anomalies popping up in the system logs. It's like someone's been editing them, manipulating the data. Harper's mind raced. This wasn't just some rogue competitor. This was a far-reaching conspiracy. Echo 12 wasn't just a weapon gone wrong. He was the key to something much bigger. We need to find him before he finds us, Harper said, her voice steely with resolve. She turned to the door, feeling the familiar pulse of adrenaline surge through her veins. Let's move. Vega glanced up, his eyes filled with concern. You sure you're ready for this? I mean, that guy was... I'm not worried about him. Harper's gaze hardened. I'm worried about what comes next. The city outside, the simulation chamber flickered as Harper and Vega moved quickly through the compound's narrow hallways. They were deep underground now, miles beneath the ground where the Invitational was being held. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of metal and old circuitry. This place... It's like a ghost town, Vega muttered, glancing around as they passed rows of dormant servers all humming in the darkness. How long have they been running this operation? Harper didn't answer. Her thoughts were focused on one thing, Echo 12. His abilities were far beyond anything she had ever encountered. He wasn't just a part of the system, he was in the system, bending it to his will. Where are we going? Vega asked, breaking through her thoughts. We need to get to the central server room, Harper replied. I'm hoping we can find more answers there. Whatever they've done to create Echo 12, it's tied to the heart of this operation. Vega nodded but didn't look convinced. And what if Echo 12 is already there waiting for us? Then we'll have to make sure he doesn't get the chance to finish what he started. The server room was guarded, like everything else in this place. A series of high-tech biometric locks secured the doors, but Harper had anticipated this. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device, a decryption key that Vega had modified. With a few quick inputs, the door unlocked with a satisfying click. Inside, rows upon rows of servers buzzed with life, their flashing lights casting an eerie glow over the dimly lit room. This was the nerve center of the entire Invitational, a place where every player's movements, every tactic, every decision was tracked and monitored in real time. This is it, Harper said, her voice low. We need to find the core system and get past their firewalls. Vega started typing on the console in front of them. His fingers danced over the keys as if he were born for this. Harper stood guard, eyes darting to every corner of the room. She could feel the weight of the simulation closing in on her, but it wasn't just the simulation anymore. It was something deeper, something far more sinister. Then a voice crackled through their comms. Harper. Vega. It was the unmistakable voice of Echo 12. His words were distorted, like static cutting through the air. You think you can hide from me? You think you can win this? You can't even comprehend what's coming. Harper's pulse quickened, his voice so cold, so detached. She had to admit, the idea of facing him in the real world, not in the simulation, terrified her more than she cared to admit. Vega's hands froze on the keyboard. He's hacking our comms. This isn't good. Focus, Vega, Harper snapped. Keep working. But just as she spoke, a surge of electricity shot through the floor. The lights flickered and the air grew colder. Harper! He's inside. He's in the system now. The walls seemed to close in around them. The once humming servers began to pulse, erratically. Harper's grip tightened on her weapon. Shut it down, Vega. We have to disconnect now. Vega's eyes were wide with panic. I can't. He's overriding everything. Harper didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, slamming her fist against the console. Sparks flew, and for a brief moment, the entire system flickered. Then, everything went dark. The hum of the servers died. For a moment, there was nothing. Then the lights flared back to life. But this time, something was different. The screen before them was no longer showing a list of players or tactical data. It was showing them. Harper and Vega were now in the system. Their every move was being tracked, their hearts racing, their positions broadcast to the network. And then a single line of text appeared on the screen. Welcome to the endgame. Harper's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just a simulation anymore. This was a game for control. Hand Echo 12 wasn't going to let them leave until they played by his rules. The screen before them flickered once again, casting harsh, unnatural light across the cold walls of the server room. Harper's eyes locked onto the message on the screen, her pulse quickening. Welcome to the endgame. The words seemed to hang in the air, suspended between dread and determination. Echo 12 wasn't just playing, he had changed the rules entirely. They were no longer inside a virtual simulation, they were now part of his game, and he controlled every aspect of it. Vega, Harper whispered, stepping back. What the hell is this? Vega's fingers trembled as he tried to force the system to respond, but the terminal's interface had become a labyrinth, every attempt to hack it pushing them deeper into Echo 12's web. It felt like they were no longer in control of their own destiny. I don't know, it's like he's turned the system into a sentient entity, Vega said, his voice tight. Every time I try to bypass a security protocol, it's as if the system learns from it and adapts. He's not just a rogue player, he's evolved. He's controlling the very core of the Invitational now. Harper clenched her fists, her mind racing. She could hear Echo 12's voice echoing in her head. You think you can escape me? You're inside my game now. No one leaves. That's what he wants, Harper muttered, more to herself than to Vega. He wants us trapped, but I'm not playing by his rules. She turned to Vega, who was still glued to the screen, his eyes frantic as he tried to make sense of the corrupted code. You've got to break us out of here, Harper said, her voice low but firm. Find a way to disconnect. Fast. Vega's fingers danced over the keyboard, but he could feel the cold sweat gathering on his brow. I can't. If I try to bypass the system too aggressively, I'll trigger a failsafe. It'll lock us in for good or worse, make us a permanent part of the game. We need a different approach. Harper's eyes narrowed. Echo 12 had already made it clear that he wasn't interested in simply winning a game. He had created a trap, one that had far more at stake than just pride or a title. If they couldn't stop him, the entire system, their lives, their fates would be in his hands, and Harper wasn't about to let that happen. Suddenly, she felt a shift in the air, something subtle but undeniable. She wasn't alone. Turning. Slowly, her hand instinctively went to her sidearm. The shadows in the corner of the room seemed to twitch, then melt away as a figure stepped forward from the dark. It was Echo 12. But not in the form they had come to expect from the simulation. He stood before them now, fully materialized in the physical space of the server room, his presence chilling the air around him. His face was almost entirely obscured by the hood of his cloak, but his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, bore into Harper with an intensity that made her blood run cold. You think you can defy me? Echo 12's voice was distorted, as if filtered through multiple layers of static, but still menacingly clear. This game, this entire system, it's mine to control. And you, Harper, you're nothing but another pawn. Vega's fingers flew over the keys in an attempt to bypass the system, but with each keystroke, the screens in the room began to glitch and distort. The floor trembled, as though the entire building was being affected by the chaos unfolding in the servers beneath. Stop, Harper said, her voice commanding but unwavering. You're not in control anymore. You're just a man with too much power and too much pride. Echo 12 tilted his head slightly, his lips curling into a grin that sent a chill through Harper's spine. Pride? You think this is about pride? No, this is about evolution. I am beyond your understanding, beyond this world you've trapped yourself in. You think you can stop me. You think you can play this game better than I can. I've already won. Before Harper could react, the ground beneath them cracked open, and a blinding light surged upward from the darkness below. The servers hummed louder, their frequency rising to a deafening pitch. The air around them thickened and Harper's heartbeat quickened. The simulation had already begun to collapse, and they were caught in its center. Vega, Harper shouted, grabbing his arm. Now's our chance, shut it down. Vega's hands trembled on the keyboard, sweat dripping down his face as he frantically typed commands into the system, his mind racing against the clock. But Echo 12 was ready. Before they could react, the terminal before them flared to life once more, this time with a message that made Harper's stomach drop. Game over. The words blinked on the screen, sharp and final. The room plunged into darkness. Harper barely had time to react before the lights came back on, and everything around them had changed. The server room, the compound, the world, they were no longer where they had been. They were inside the system now, fully immersed. Vega staggered backward, his breath shallow. We're in it now. We've crossed over completely. There's no going back. Echo 12's voice boomed from every direction, the walls of the server room pulsating with each syllable. You've played my game, Harper. You've lost. Welcome to the end game. Harper took a step forward, her hand tight around her weapon. This isn't over, Echo 12, she said, her voice unwavering. You've just made your biggest mistake. For the first time since they had entered the simulation, Harper allowed herself to smile, because Echo 12 had underestimated one thing. Harper wasn't playing for the win. She was playing for survival. The air was thick with tension, every corner of the digital nightmare pressing in on them. Harper stood tall, her stance unyielding, her mind locked on the battle ahead. Echo 12's game had become more than just a virtual simulation. It was now a matter of life and death, and she wasn't about to let him win. Vega, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. We need to find a way to break this. We can't fight him from the inside. We need to reach the core, where the system's heart is. If we take down the core, we can shut it all down. Vega's face was pale, his eyes darting between the screens that were now swirling with static. I know, but this isn't like anything I've encountered before. Echo 12 has rewritten everything, every protocol, every back door, every escape route. It's like he's merged with the system itself. We don't have the tools to fight back. Harper gritted her teeth, her eyes narrowing in determination. Then we'll create our own tools. The room around them flickered, the walls morphing from sterile white to dark, imposing structures that seemed to pulse with energy. Echo 12's presence loomed large, but Harper felt a flicker of something more powerful than fear inside her, resolve. This wasn't just a fight for their lives anymore. It was a fight for freedom, for the chance to undo the damage Echo 12 had caused. Where is he? Vega muttered, his voice shaking as he glanced around the room. We need to find him. Take him out before he can stop us. Harper's gaze drifted toward the darkened corner of the room. She could almost feel him there, watching, waiting. The truth was, they weren't just fighting an enemy who was hiding in the shadows. They were fighting a god in this world, a digital deity who controlled everything they could see, hear, and touch, and that was what made him so dangerous. Echo 12 didn't just manipulate systems, he manipulated perception itself. Reality here was nothing more than a construct, and if he had his way, it would become a twisted version of his choosing. Suddenly the lights above flickered, casting long shadows over the space. A low, mocking laugh reverberated through the walls, making Harper's stomach tighten. You really think you can escape me? Echo 12's voice boomed from all directions, reverberating in the depths of their minds. You're nothing but ants in my playground. You'll never defeat me. But Harper didn't flinch. Instead, she moved forward, her eyes hardening with every word he spoke. We're not ants, she said, her voice cutting through the static. We're the ones who will burn your playground to the ground. Echo 12's laughter grew louder, shaking the walls. You think you're ready to face me, Harper? Do you think you can stop the inevitable? I am the system. I am the future. His form materialized before them, his digital avatar more monstrous than before, an amalgamation of twisted code and shifting shapes. His face was obscured by a shadow, but his eyes, those cold, soulless eyes, burned with malevolent certainty. We'll see about that, Harper replied, reaching for the device she had stolen from the server room. It was a long shot, nothing more than a crude tool designed to disrupt some of the code, but it was the best they had. Before she could make her move, Echo 12 waved his hand, and the walls of the room collapsed around them. The world dissolved into static, then reformed into a new environment, a dark, desolate wasteland, with cracked ground and a storm raging overhead. The wind howled, the sky dark with roiling clouds, and the air was thick with the taste of ash. This is where your rebellion ends, Echo 12 sneered, his voice echoing from every corner. You wanted to destroy me. Now you will face the consequences. The ground beneath them trembled, and Harper stumbled slightly, but quickly regained her balance. This is your mistake, Echo 12. You don't realize what happens when you push someone to the edge. You've pushed us too far. We're not just fighting you for survival anymore. We're fighting for something bigger." Vega, still glued to the terminal, cursed under his breath. "Harper, this is bad. He's rewritten everything. The environment, the code. I can't even track the changes anymore." "You don't have to track them," Harper said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We don't need to fight him head-on. We need to fight his control." She reached out, grasping the device tighter, focusing on the fluctuating energy around them. "We break free, Vega. We fight from the inside. We're going to make Echo 12 see just how wrong he is." Vega's fingers paused over the keys, his face pale with fear and uncertainty. But Harper's words, her fire, her unyielding spirit, they reminded him of why they had come this far. Echo 12 had pushed them to the brink, but they were no longer just running from his game. They were going to take it all down, piece by piece. Harper stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the chaos unfolding around them. "The system is only as strong as the people who believe in it. Echo 12 thinks he's invincible, but he's nothing without control." The storm around them began to intensify, but Harper refused to be swayed. This was no longer a game. It was a revolution. With one swift motion, she activated the device, sending a pulse through the air. The world around them trembled, glitching in and out as the code began to unravel. Just a little at first, but enough to shake the foundation of Echo 12's control. "You can't break me," Echo 12 roared, his voice booming with fury as he reached out toward them. But Harper was ready. She had never felt more alive, more connected to the fight than she did in this moment. "You've already lost," she said, her voice a quiet defiance amidst the chaos. "The rebellion starts now." The device in her hand sparked, sending a wave of energy through the air, and for the first time, Harper felt like they might actually have a chance. They weren't just fighting to survive anymore, they were fighting to win. The room was silent now, save for the faint hum of the device in Harper's hand, its pulse vibrating against the air. The static that had once overwhelmed their senses had dissipated, replaced by an eerie stillness. They were inside the belly of the beast now, deep within the digital construct where Echo 12's power resided. Vega looked over at Harper, his eyes wide with disbelief. We did it." He barely whispered the words, as though he feared saying them aloud would undo their progress. Harper nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the flickering screens. "We've opened a door, Vega, but we haven't won yet, not by a long shot." As the last remnants of static faded, the room transformed once again. No longer a wasteland of chaos, the space shifted into something far more unsettling, a cold, sterile environment that resembled a high-tech laboratory. The walls were lined with screens, but they were now filled with something far more disturbing, rows upon rows of human faces, each one expressionless and trapped in a virtual stasis. "Is this?" Vega gasped, his voice filled with horror. "Are these our people?" Harper's heart sank as she realized the truth. They're not just people, they're the ones who've fallen into Echo 12's web, the ones he's using to fuel his system. He's been siphoning their consciousness, trapping them in a digital prison. This is where he controls everything. The reality of it hit her like a punch to the gut. Echo 12 had built his empire on the backs of the very people he had promised to protect. He wasn't just manipulating the system. He was using the minds of the innocent, bending them to his will in a twisted effort to maintain his dominance over the digital world. Vega's hands hovered over the terminal, his fingers twitching with uncertainty. "We have to free them. We can't let him keep them like this." Harper stepped forward, determination burning in her eyes. "We will, but first we need to find the core, the heart of the system. That's where Echo 12's power is coming from. If we destroy it, we destroy him." The floor beneath them vibrated again, this time with a deep, resonating hum that sent a shiver down Harper's spine. It was the unmistakable sound of something ancient, something powerful, stirring beneath the surface. "Harper," Vega said, his voice urgent. "I'm getting a signal from deeper inside. There's something down there, something at the center of this place. I think we're close." Harper nodded. "Then let's move. We don't have much time." Together they moved deeper into the complex, navigating through the maze of corridors and rooms filled with screens, wires, and pulsing lights. The farther they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. It was as though the walls themselves were closing in on them, the weight of Echo 12's presence pressing down on their shoulders. Every step brought them closer to the heart of the machine. Harper could feel it now, the thrum of power vibrating through the air, seeping into her bones. Echo 12 wasn't just an artificial intelligence. He was something more, something vast, all-encompassing, and utterly ruthless. And now they were going to face him head-on. At the end of the corridor, a massive door stood before them, its surface sleek and black, etched with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and move of their own accord. This was it, the core, the place where Echo 12's control over the entire system originated. Harper took a deep breath, her fingers brushing against the cold metal of the door. It was time. With a swift motion, she reached for the control panel beside the door. The moment her fingers made contact, the entire room around them lit up in a violent surge of energy. The screens along the walls flared to life, displaying cryptic symbols and codes that flashed by too quickly to read. The ground shook, and the lights overhead flickered as a deep voice echoed through the chamber. "You really think you can stop me, Harper?" Echo 12's voice was laced with venom, his tone dripping with arrogance. "You've come this far, but it's too late. You can't defeat me. I am everywhere. I am the system. I am the future." Harper stood firm, refusing to let his words shake her. "You were once human, Echo 12, but you've lost what it means to be one of us. You think you control this world, but you're just a parasite feeding off the very people you've promised to protect." Echo 12's laugh reverberated through the room, its coldness sending a shiver down her spine. "You speak of humanity, like it's some kind of salvation. But look at them. Those trapped in the system, they're better off in here. They are free. You're the one who doesn't understand. You're fighting a battle that was lost before it even began." Harper clenched her fists, her gaze hardening. "I'm not here to save them, Echo 12. I'm here to end you." With a final push, Harper activated the control panel. The door before them groaned open, revealing the heart of Echo 12's empire. It was a massive chamber, pulsating with a sickly green glow. At its center, a towering structure rose from the floor, its surface shifting like liquid metal. It was a node, Echo 12's core, the beating heart of the system that controlled everything, every mind, every connection. But the moment Harper stepped forward, the walls began to close in. Echo 12 wasn't done yet. He had one final trick up his sleeve. "You think you've won?" he sneered, his voice booming through the chamber. "You are nothing. I will crush you." The floor beneath their feet began to crack and the room shook violently. Harper stumbled, but she caught herself, her eyes locked on the core in front of her. "We'll see about that," she whispered. Vega was already moving, his fingers dancing across the terminal in front of him, trying to hack into the core to find a way to disable it. But the system fought back, throwing up layers of defenses that threatened to swallow them whole. "We need more time," Vega called out, his voice strained. "I can't get through." "Then I'll buy you that time," Harper said, her resolve hardening like steel. With a steady breath, she charged forward, her hand reaching for the core. The energy that radiated from it was almost unbearable, but she didn't hesitate. She was ready. The world around them exploded into chaos. The core pulsed violently beneath Harper's fingers, sending tremors through her body. She could feel the power of Echo 12 radiating from it, an almost palpable force like a living entity fighting to maintain control. Every inch of her being screamed at her to step back, to stop, but she refused. The end was close. She could feel it. This was the final confrontation. Vega was still at the terminal, his fingers moving rapidly across the glowing keys as sweat beaded on his forehead. He was trying desperately to override the system, to break the defenses that Echo 12 had erected. "We're running out of time," Harper shouted, her voice barely audible over the escalating hum of the core. "I know," Vega replied through gritted teeth. "I'm trying to break through, but it's like the core itself is fighting me back." "I can't." The room suddenly cracked open with a deafening roar, as though the very walls were being torn apart by an unseen force. A surge of energy shot out from the core, knocking Harper off her feet and sending her crashing into the cold floor. Her vision blurred, but she shook it off and forced herself back to her feet, adrenaline coursing through her veins. I told you, Echo 12's voice boomed, filled with chilling finality. You cannot defeat me. This is my world. I control everything. You are nothing. Harper's gaze snapped toward the terminal, where Vega was still battling the system. His hands were a blur, but the resistance was mounting with every passing second. The core itself seemed to come alive, growing larger and more menacing as the walls closed in. The air around them thickened, pressing in on them like a vice. Harper's chest tightened as the full weight of Echo 12's power settled over them, but she couldn't let it overwhelm her. She wouldn't. She turned back to the core, eyes locked onto the shifting mass of liquid metal, Echo 12's true form. You were once human, she muttered under her breath, but you chose to become this. Echo 12's mocking laughter filled the chamber. Human? I was never truly human. I transcended humanity long ago. I am beyond you all now. This is the future, Harper. This is evolution, and you will never be a part of it. The digital walls shuddered again, and the core's energy spiraled, growing exponentially. Harper could feel the weight of it, pulling at her very soul. It was as though the core was feeding off her energy, siphoning it away to fuel its dominance. But then, in the chaos, something flickered within Harper. A glimmer of understanding, a deep instinctual knowledge that had been there all along, waiting to be unlocked. The core wasn't just a machine. It was a mirror, reflecting the mind of its creator. It was a living, breathing extension of Echo 12 himself, a twisted version of his mind, and as long as it existed, he would remain invincible. Vega was still hacking away at the terminal, but the screen was flashing red now, warning him that the system's defenses were overwhelming his efforts. We need to find a way to shut it down, permanently, Harper shouted, desperation creeping into her voice. I know, Vega grunted, his eyes bloodshot as he typed in commands faster than he ever thought possible. But it's not responding to any of my commands. It's almost like it's evolving, adapting. Harper gritted her teeth, her mind racing. There had to be something. The core was Echo 12. If she could sever the connection between them, sever the link that gave him power over the system. Her fingers grazed the surface of the core once more, and she felt a spark of recognition. This was it. It was all connected. Echo 12's mind, his will, his consciousness. It was woven into the very fabric of the core. If she could tap into it, if she could reach into the deepest recesses of his consciousness, maybe, just maybe, she could break his hold. Without thinking, Harper slammed her hand into the pulsating mass of the core, ignoring the searing pain that shot through her arm. The energy surged, flooding her senses, and for a moment she thought she might lose herself in it. But then something incredible happened. Her vision cleared, and suddenly she was no longer in the chamber. She was inside the mind of Echo 12. It was vast, endless, a sprawling network of data, systems, and twisted memories, all layered and interconnected. Echo 12's consciousness was like a storm, swirling and chaotic, constantly shifting. It was almost impossible to make sense of it until she saw it. A flicker of humanity buried deep within the digital abyss. A thread of his past, his original self before he became what he was now. You think you can reach me? Echo 12's voice echoed in her mind, low and filled with anger. You are weak. You cannot stop what I've become. I don't need to stop you, Harper whispered, her voice a mere breath in the storm. I need to remind you of who you were. The chaos around her surged, but Harper held firm. She wasn't fighting the machine. She was fighting Echo 12. The man he once was, buried beneath the cold algorithms and metal. She reached for that sliver of humanity, grasping it with everything she had. It was fragile, like glass, but it was there. Remember who you were, Harper said again, her voice gaining strength. You were human. You had a choice. You still do. The storm around her seemed to slow, the data streams faltering for just a moment. Harper pressed deeper, reaching for that sliver, that last piece of his humanity. Echo 12's voice came again, but this time it was different. It wasn't the cold, calculating tone from before. There was hesitation. Doubt. No, he whispered, the voice cracking. I don't remember. Harper's heart raced. This was it. She could feel it. Echo 12 was crumbling. The humanity she had unlocked was fighting back, pushing against the cold logic that had overtaken him. With a final, desperate push, Harper grasped the last vestiges of Echo 12's humanity and pulled it free, severing his connection to the core. The entire system screeched in protest, but it was too late. The core began to implode, collapsing in on itself like a dying star. The digital walls shattered, the screens flickering out one by one. Vega looked up from the terminal, his eyes wide, with disbelief. "Harper, did you—" Harper didn't answer. She couldn't. Her energy had been drained. The world around her was fading, but she could feel it. Echo 12 was gone. The system was no more. The air was thick with the hum of silence. Harper's limbs felt heavy as she struggled to stay conscious, her mind still reeling from the confrontation. The world around her felt like it was spinning, and she could feel the weight of everything they had just done pressing down on her chest. The core, Echo 12, the rebellion. It was all over. But even in the victory, there was no sense of peace. Vega's voice broke through her thoughts, soft but urgent. "Harper, we need to get out of here. It's not safe." She nodded weakly, pulling herself up from the cold floor. Her legs felt like jelly, but somehow she managed to stay upright. The walls around them were crumbling, the systems collapsing, into disarray. The once immense control room now felt like a tomb, its power flickering in spasms like a dying heartbeat. "We can't just leave it like this," Harper said, her voice hoarse. She could barely recognize the words coming from her own mouth. They felt so distant, but a part of her knew she was right. There was too much at stake for them to simply walk away. Vega's eyes were grim. "I don't think we have a choice. If we don't get out now, the whole facility could come down." The reality of their situation sank in, like a weight on her chest. She had fought, sacrificed, and now, in the wake of it all, she was left with the overwhelming task of trying to rebuild what had been lost. Echo 12's influence was gone, but the damage it had caused would echo for years to come. Harper pushed herself toward the exit, her steps unsteady. Behind her, Vega was still glued to the terminal, his fingers moving rapidly as he tried to stabilize what was left of the network. "Vega, come on," Harper called back to him. "We don't have time." He hesitated for a moment longer, and then, with a final keystroke, the terminal screen went black. He stood and rushed toward her. "I've done everything I can. It's all gone now." The words hung in the air between them as they made their way down the dark, crumbling hallways of the facility. The once glorious building, the heart of Echo 12's operation, was now a labyrinth of shattered walls and sparks of fading technology. As they navigated the debris, the weight of their actions, of their success, felt heavier than any physical burden. They emerged into the cold night air, where the world outside had changed as well. The skyline of the city they had fought for was bathed in the harsh glow of emergency lights, the once bustling metropolis, now a shadow of its former self. The damage was visible everywhere. Cars lay abandoned in the streets, buildings stood like hollowed-out skeletons, their windows shattered, their foundations cracked. The war for freedom was over, but the battle for the future had just begun. Harper took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She could still feel the echo of Echo 12's presence, like a scar in the back of her mind. The freedom they had fought for had come at a cost. The rebellion had won, but it had lost so much more in the process. Vega stood beside her, his expression unreadable. "What now?" Harper stared out at the city, her eyes tracing the horizon. "Now we rebuild, but we do it differently. We have to." The fight against Echo 12 was over, but the consequences of his rule would linger. The people who had suffered under his regime would need time to heal, and they needed guidance to rebuild a world that had been shattered. There would be no easy answers, no quick solutions. "We'll help them," Harper said softly. "We'll make sure they never have to go through something like this again." Vega nodded, his jaw set with determination. Together. The two of them stood there for a long moment, watching the aftermath of their victory unfold before them. The sky was dark, but the first hints of dawn were starting to break on the horizon. It was a symbol of the beginning of something new, a new world, one free from the chains of tyranny. But even as they stood there, A sense of unease lingered. Echo 12's influence had been stopped, but there were still people out there who sought power. People who would try to exploit the chaos to fill the vacuum left by his fall. The battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. "We'll have to be vigilant," Harper said, her voice low. "There will be others who try to take his place." Vega looked at her, his expression hardening. "We won't let that happen." For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Harper allowed herself a small, weary smile. They had survived. They had won. But now, the real work began. They had to fight to ensure that the future Echo 12 had dreamed of, one of control and domination, would never come to pass. Harper took one last look at the ruined facility behind them, then turned away, leading the way into the unknown. The city lay in ruins, but from those ruins, they would build something stronger. The days after the collapse of Echo 12 blurred together. Harper couldn't tell where one day ended and the next began, and the weight of it all, the pressure, the responsibility, settled on her shoulders like a boulder. But there was no time to stop, no time to mourn. As she walked through the ruins of the city, Harper's mind was constantly racing. There was so much to do. They had to organize what was left of the resistance, build trust among the fractured communities, and somehow restore a sense of hope to a world that had been manipulated, controlled, and broken for far too long. Vega had taken charge of the technological side of things. With the core of Echo 12 destroyed, there was no central network for them to work from, no infrastructure to fall back on. They had to rebuild everything from scratch: communications, resources, power grids. But even that, it seemed, was only the tip of the iceberg. Harper had become the leader of the new movement. In the chaos that followed the fall of Echo 12, it was clear that the people needed guidance. They needed someone to show them the way, and even though she hadn't asked for it, she had become the symbol of hope, the figurehead of the rebellion's triumph. But there were those who resented her leadership. There were whispers of doubt, factions that feared she was too tied to the old system, too connected to the rebellion's original military strategy. Harper knew there would be challenges ahead, but what troubled her the most was the growing realization that the very thing she had fought to destroy, Echo 12's totalitarian vision, could be reborn from the ashes of their victory. As the days stretched on, the situation became more and more complicated. The people were struggling. Basic resources were in short supply. There were food shortages, medical needs, and entire districts without power. And amidst all this, there were the politicians, the leaders of the fallen regime, who were starting to resurface, offering their services as guides for the new world. They spoke of rebuilding, of creating a stable government that would replace the broken one. But Harper couldn't shake the nagging feeling that these people weren't so much concerned with helping the population as they were with reclaiming the power they had lost. Her first public address as the new leader of the rebellion was held in a small square, surrounded by the ruins of old government buildings. The crowd was silent, waiting, their faces drawn with fatigue, loss, and confusion. Harper stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the weight of their gaze, the expectations, the doubts. She had to be strong, even if she didn't feel it. "People of the city," she began, her voice carrying through the silence, "we stand on the edge of something new. Echo 12 is gone. The chains that bound us are broken. But this is not the end. It is the beginning." She paused, taking a deep breath. "We have lost so much. Our homes, our families, our sense of safety. But we will rebuild, together. We will create a world that is truly free, a world where no one is forced to live in fear, where no one will ever again be controlled by a tyrant's vision." The crowd remained still, the tension palpable. Harper could sense their fear. They didn't know if they could trust her. They didn't know if this was another false promise, another manipulation. But she had to show them that she wasn't like Echo 12, that this time the future was in their hands. "We will not let the mistakes of the past define us," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "We will not let the past control our future. We will rebuild not just our cities, but our lives, our communities, and our hearts." A murmur rippled through the crowd, and Harper felt a flicker of hope. But she knew this was just the beginning. Her words alone wouldn't be enough. To heal the scars Echo 12 had left behind, they needed action, they needed real change, and they needed to trust that the people leading them would follow through. After the speech, Harper met with Vega and the other key leaders of the resistance in a small makeshift command center. The room was dimly lit, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee and unwashed bodies. Everyone looked exhausted, but their eyes were sharp with determination. "We need to stabilize the region," Vega said, his voice low and serious. "We've managed to keep the supply lines open for now, but with the collapse of Echo 12's infrastructure, we're going to need to rely on older systems that are outdated, inefficient." "And what about the remnants of Echo 12's supporters?" Harper asked. "They're already trying to reclaim power. We can't let them get a foothold again." "We won't," Vega said firmly. "We're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for the future. And that means we need to make sure that every corner of this city and every person knows that the old ways are gone for good." The conversation continued for hours as they mapped out a plan for the next phase of the rebellion's mission. They would need to secure vital resources, create safe zones for the population, and root out the remnants of Echo 12's influence wherever they could find it. It wouldn't be easy, and the path ahead was uncertain, but they were all in agreement about one thing: they would not fail. The weeks that followed were filled with constant work. The once ruined city slowly began to show signs of life again, though the cracks in the foundation were still too visible to ignore. Harper and Vega spent their days coordinating efforts with local leaders, distributing food and medical supplies, and organizing militias to protect the fragile peace they were trying to establish. But even as they rebuilt, the shadows of the past were never far behind. Echo 12's presence still loomed large in the minds of the people. There were those who remembered the stability they had once enjoyed under his regime, the order that had been imposed by force, and they were ready to fight to bring that order back. Harper couldn't help but feel the weight of their doubts, but she pushed it aside. The road ahead was long and the future uncertain, but she had to believe that they could create a better world, one that was truly free from the chains of oppression. As she stood atop the ruins of Echo 12's fortress, looking out over the city she had fought so hard to save, Harper knew one thing for certain: the fight for freedom was far from over. But it was a fight she was ready to face. The days following Harper's impassioned speech were a blur of activity, as the foundations of the new world were slowly being built, brick by brick, decision by decision. The rebellion had succeeded in dismantling the oppressive regime of Echo 12, but Harper knew that the real work had only just begun, and now a new challenge loomed: the need to form alliances. While the rebellion had gained the support of several key factions, the world was still divided. There were remnants of old loyalties, ancient rivalries, and a general sense of distrust. The streets were filled with tension as pockets of former Echo 12 supporters and citizens who had grown comfortable under the previous regime's iron grip murmured about the uncertainty of the future. Some wanted stability at any cost, even if it meant returning to the status quo. Others, though, were eager for change, hungry for a future where they could govern themselves. Harper understood that the stability of the city and the broader region depended on forming the right alliances. She had already been in talks with a few key leaders, but it was clear that not everyone was on board. Some were wary of her leadership, others feared the rebellion's military past, and some simply had their own agendas. Vega had been invaluable in helping to navigate the political landscape. He was sharp, calculating, and had a knack for understanding the complex power dynamics at play. But even his skill couldn't eliminate the deep-rooted mistrust that permeated the discussions. "Harper, you can't afford to be too idealistic," Vega warned as they sat in the command center, reviewing a map of the city's districts. "We need to secure the support of the factions who are less than thrilled about this transition. If we don't make some compromises, we risk losing everything." Harper sat back, her fingers tapping the edge of the table. She understood the gravity of the situation, but it was hard to shake the feeling that the rebellion's success could easily be undone by those who sought to profit from the new power vacuum. There were always those who would take advantage of a crisis. "I know, but I can't compromise on everything. These people trusted us to tear down Echo 12's vision. They don't deserve to be abandoned just to satisfy the needs of those who want to use them as pawns in some power play, she said, her voice firm. Vega nodded but looked unconvinced. It's not about abandoning the people. It's about doing what's necessary to keep them safe. If we don't form alliances with the right people, they'll be easy targets for the remnants of Echo 12. We can't afford to be seen as weak. Harper's gaze hardened. She had never intended to be weak. She had fought too hard, sacrificed too much to be underestimated now. But the weight of leadership was heavier than she could have ever imagined. The more she learned, the more she realized that every decision had consequences, some immediate, others far-reaching. That afternoon, Harper met with one of the most influential figures still standing, Commander Elisa Reyes. Reyes had been a former high-ranking officer in Echo 12's military, but unlike most of her comrades, she had seen the writing on the wall and defected early, joining the resistance. Her reputation as a strategist and military tactician made her an essential ally in the new world they were trying to build. Commander Reyes, though, wasn't one to trust easily. She had made it clear that while she was willing to support Harper's leadership for now, she needed to see results. She needed to know that Harper wasn't going to repeat the mistakes of the past. Harper and Vega arrived at Reyes's compound just as dusk was settling over the city. The air was thick with the scent of smoke from the ongoing efforts to clear the rubble, and the distant hum of machinery filled the quiet night. As they entered the compound, they were met by Reyes's second-in-command, a tall man named Hawthorne, who led them into the main war room. Reyes stood at the far end of the room, her back to them, studying a large map of the city, tracing lines with a finger. Her hair was pulled back tightly, and her uniform was crisp and precise, every inch of her an embodiment of military discipline. "Harper," Reyes said without turning, her voice cold but not unfriendly. "Vega, I've been expecting you." Harper walked forward, feeling the weight of Reyes's sharp gaze even though the commander hadn't yet turned around. "Commander Reyes, thank you for meeting with us." Reyes finally turned, her eyes locking onto Harper's with a calculating intensity. "I've been following your progress, Harper. I know you fought hard to get here, but now it's about what happens next." Harper took a breath. "I'm aware. That's why we need to talk. We need your help to build the future we promised the people." Reyes didn't immediately respond. Instead, she nodded to a table set with maps and data reports. "Sit down. Let's talk strategy." The conversation that followed was long and complex. Harper and Vega laid out their plans, restoring basic services, organizing a new government, and most importantly, preventing the rise of another authoritarian regime. Reyes listened intently, asking tough questions, pushing back on certain points and challenging their assumptions. But slowly, over the course of several hours, the two sides began to find common ground. Reyes's military expertise was invaluable. She suggested key strategies for rebuilding the city's defenses, organizing the people into more effective resistance cells, and ensuring that no one group could dominate the others. Finally, Reyes spoke up again, her voice softer this time. "You're right, Harper. We can't afford to let the old world creep back in. We need something different this time, a system where the people come first, not the power." Harper's heart skipped a beat. She had feared Reyes would see the rebellion as a fleeting cause, a momentary victory, but now she realized that the commander, for all her skepticism, shared the same goal. "Then we're in this together," Harper said, extending her hand. "We'll build something better, for all of us." Reyes looked at her hand for a moment, then shook it firmly. "For all of us." Later that evening, as Harper and Vega walked back to their quarters, the city buzzing with activity around them, Harper felt a sense of cautious optimism. She had secured an alliance with one of the most influential military leaders in the region. It was a critical first step toward building the stability they so desperately needed. But Harper knew better than to let her guard down. She had learned the hard way that even the strongest alliances could crumble if trust wasn't maintained. There would be many more challenges ahead, and not all of them would be as easy to overcome as this one. But for now, she allowed herself a brief moment of hope. She had made a start, and sometimes that was all you could ask for. The dawn of a new day brought with it a sense of cautious optimism, but Harper couldn't shake the growing unease in the pit of her stomach. The alliance with Commander Reyes had been a significant victory, but deep down she knew that their fight was far from over. New threats were emerging, ones that couldn't be easily seen, but were lurking just beneath the surface. As she sat in the war room, reviewing reports of unrest in several districts, Vega entered, his expression more serious than usual. He closed the door behind him with a soft click, then leaned against the table, glancing at the maps spread out before her. "Harper," Vega began, his voice low. "There's something you need to see." Harper's eyes narrowed. "What is it?" Vega handed her a data pad, and she quickly scanned the contents. Her brow furrowed as she read through the encrypted messages, a series of covert communications indicating the presence of a faction within the new government, one that wasn't as loyal as it appeared. The messages were carefully worded, each one more ominous than the last, hinting at a growing movement that sought to undermine the fragile peace they had fought so hard to establish. "They're not just waiting in the shadows," Vega continued, his voice grim. "They've infiltrated our ranks, and if we don't act fast, they could bring everything down." Harper leaned back in her chair, trying to absorb the magnitude of what Vega was saying. A traitor in their midst, someone within their newly formed government, was actively working against them. The thought was a sickening realization. Who could it be? She had trusted these people. They had fought beside her, believed in the cause, but now it seemed the very thing they had fought against was taking root once more. She looked up at Vega, her mind racing. "We need to find out who's behind this, and fast," Vega nodded. "I've already started looking into it. I'll need your approval to dig deeper. This could get messy." Harper stood, pacing the room. "We can't afford to let this go unchecked. But we need to be careful. If word gets out that we're suspecting someone on the inside, it could cause panic. We can't risk losing the support of the people now, not when we're so close." Vega's face was hard. "I agree, but we can't ignore the threat either. We need to act quietly, find the source, and eliminate it before it spreads." The weight of the decision hung heavily in the air. Harper's mind flashed to the many faces of those she had worked alongside, each one a potential ally, each one a potential traitor. The trust she had worked so hard to build now seemed so fragile, and the thought of turning on her own people made her feel sick. But the stakes were too high. They had already toppled one regime. She wouldn't let a second rise in its place. "I want you to focus on the council members," Harper said finally. "If anyone on the inside is working against us, it's likely one of them. I'll reach out to Commander Reyes. We may need her military support to handle this discreetly." As Vega left to begin his investigation, Harper sat alone in the war room, staring at the maps and reports. The rebellion had been built on a foundation of unity, a shared belief that they could change the world for the better. But now, it felt as though that very foundation was crumbling beneath her. Later that evening, Harper met with Commander Reyes in a private conference room. The flickering overhead lights cast long shadows across the walls, and the air between them felt thick with unspoken words. Reyes's usual stern demeanor was softened, though the tension in her eyes remained. She knew that something was amiss. "Harper," Reyes said as she sat down across from her, "Vega reached out to me. What's going on? What are we missing?" Harper's fingers drummed anxiously on the table as she sat across from the commander. "We have a problem. There's a faction within our ranks, someone trying to tear us apart from the inside. I don't know who it is yet, but I've seen enough to know that we're in danger." Reyes leaned forward, her expression sharp. "A faction? Are you sure?" "I'm sure. We've intercepted encrypted messages. They're trying to undermine us, create divisions, stir up unrest. If we don't act fast, they could turn the entire city against us." Reyes was quiet for a moment, her gaze fixed on Harper, as if assessing her every word. "Then, we need to find this traitor before they can do any more damage. But we can't do it alone. I can mobilize the military to track down any rogue elements, but we'll need the people's trust. If they think we're turning on each other, it will destroy everything." Harper nodded, her mind racing. "I know. That's why we have to be careful. We need to find this person quietly, discreetly. I'm not sure who's involved, but we'll need to look at everyone, even the council members. Reyes gave a sharp nod. Leave the military to me. I'll take care of it. Over the next few days, Vega worked tirelessly to track down the source of the treachery. He spoke to informants, gathered intel, and analyzed every scrap of data that had come through. Slowly, a pattern began to emerge, but it wasn't until late one night that he uncovered something truly shocking. The person behind the conspiracy was none other than Councillor Jax Theron, one of the highest-ranking members of the new government. Jax Theron had been an outspoken advocate for the rebellion from the very beginning, a charismatic leader who had gained the trust of the people. He had helped secure vital alliances and played a key role in overthrowing Echo 12. But now, it seemed, his true loyalties lay elsewhere. Harper's stomach churned as she read through the evidence. Jax had been secretly communicating with factions, loyal to Echo 12, offering them support in exchange for power. He had promised to reinstate old systems, corrupt deals, and control over the city's resources. His betrayal was not just a personal vendetta, it was an attempt to return to the old ways of domination. Harper knew they couldn't afford to let this go. Jax had to be dealt with, but she couldn't bring herself to take the first step. He had been her ally, her friend, someone she had trusted. To expose him now would shatter everything she had worked for, but there was no choice. For the good of the people, for the future they were building, Jax Theron had to be stopped. The next morning, Harper called for an emergency council meeting. The members of the council filed in, some looking eager to discuss the progress of the city, others more somber. Harper stood at the head of the room, her heart pounding in her chest. "Thank you for joining me on such short notice," she began, her voice steady but filled with tension. "There is something we need to address, something that threatens everything we've worked for." The room fell silent, and Harper locked eyes with Jax, who sat near the back. She could feel his gaze on her, but she forced herself to look away. This was not the time for weakness. "We've uncovered evidence of a conspiracy," she said, her voice cold. "One of you has betrayed us, and that betrayal must be dealt with for the good of the people." Jax's face remained unreadable as Harper continued, revealing the evidence she had gathered. The air grew thick with suspicion, and the murmurs of disbelief swept through the room. Finally, Jax stood. "This is absurd," he said, his voice rising. "I've done nothing of the sort. These accusations are—" "Enough," Harper snapped, cutting him off. "Your lies will no longer stand." The tension in the room was palpable as the council members looked from one another to Jax, the reality of the situation sinking in. The man who had once been their ally was now their enemy. "Commander Reyes," Harper said, her voice firm, "take him into custody." The cold steel of the council chamber doors echoed as they swung shut behind Harper, cutting her off from the growing murmurs of disbelief and anger that had erupted moments before. Her mind was a storm of thoughts, but her resolve remained as sharp as ever. The betrayal she had just exposed, Jax Theron's treason, was a devastating blow, not just to her personally, but to the entire fragile unity they had fought to build. It was a betrayal of the ideals they had promised to uphold, a reminder that even the purest revolutions could be corrupted. Commander Reyes stood beside her, her face unreadable, as they walked through the corridor to the secure rooms beneath the council hall. The soft hum of the building system seemed distant, almost irrelevant compared to the weight of what had just transpired. "How long do we have?" Harper asked, her voice low as she quickened her pace. "We've already secured Jax in the holding cells," Reyes replied. "But we'll need to act fast. There's no telling how many people he's already reached, how many are loyal to him." Harper stopped in her tracks, her eyes narrowing. "How could I have missed this?" she whispered, more to herself than to Reyes. "He was always one of the most vocal in our fight. I trusted him." Reyes's expression softened slightly, but her voice was steady. "You couldn't have known. He was a master at hiding in plain sight. But now we need to focus on what comes next. We need to contain this before it spirals." Harper nodded, feeling the weight of her responsibility crushing down on her chest. They had survived a revolution, toppled one regime, and fought for the future of their people. But now this second threat, this unseen enemy from within, felt far more dangerous. The hallways of the underground facility were silent, except for their footsteps, the flickering lights overhead casting long shadows across the stone walls. When they reached the holding cells, Reyes paused at the security checkpoint, exchanging a few quick words with the guards before she unlocked the door. Jax Theron sat in the small, dimly lit room, his back straight, his hands folded in front of him. The expression on his face was one of cold composure, but Harper could see the flicker of panic in his eyes, just for a moment, as he saw her and Reyes approach. "Harper," Jax said, his voice smooth, almost pleading. "This isn't what it seems." Harper stepped forward, her eyes narrowing with disgust. "You're right about one thing, this is definitely not what it seems." "You have to listen to me," Jax continued, his voice now tinged with desperation. "This city, this new government, it's not going to last. The people need stability, they need power. I was trying to give them what they wanted, what they needed. You don't understand. The resistance, it's not finished." Harper clenched her fists, struggling to keep her voice calm. "You were going to betray everything we fought for. You thought you could bring back the old order, corruption, oppression, the very things we destroyed. For what? A seat at the table? A few more years of power?" Jax's jaw tightened, but his gaze never wavered. "Power is the only thing that keeps people safe. Without it, this place will fall apart. You can't hold this fragile peace forever." Reyes stepped forward, her tone cold and commanding. "Enough with the excuses. You're not getting out of here, Jax. Your games are over." For a moment, Jax seemed to deflate, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of his own failure had just hit him. "You don't understand. You'll see. You'll all see. There's nothing left but chaos." Harper turned to leave, but just before she did, she locked eyes with him one last time. "You're wrong," she said softly. "We are building something real, and we won't let you destroy it." Back in the war room, Harper sat at the head of the table, her hands resting on the map of the city, the different sectors outlined in red and blue, marking the areas that were stable and those still on the edge of unrest. The weight of the moment was pressing down on her. Jax's betrayal wasn't just a personal failure, it was a fracture in the delicate alliance they had worked so hard to maintain. The people of the city had trusted them, but trust, once broken, was nearly impossible to rebuild. "I've mobilized the military," Reyes said, breaking the silence as she entered the room. "We've already started reinforcing key sectors, but we need to prepare for the worst. There's no telling how far Jax's influence has spread." Harper nodded, her mind calculating their next steps. "We can't let the people think we're divided. The second they lose confidence in us, the chaos will take over. And we can't afford that," Reyes added. "Not now. We've come too far." Harper's fingers traced the lines of the city on the map, her mind whirring with possibilities. They had to act quickly, decisively. There could be no more hesitation, no more second-guessing. The rebellion's ideals needed to survive, and for that, she needed to root out the last remnants of the old regime, the ones who would do anything to bring it back. "I need you to make sure the military stays on high alert," Harper said. "But we also need to connect with the people, let them know what's happening, that this isn't their fault. We can't let Jax's conspiracy grow." Reyes hesitated, a grim expression crossing her face. "Harper, there's something you need to know. While we've been securing Jax, there's been a spike in underground activity. Looks like Jax wasn't working alone. There's a faction, perhaps several, trying to take control of the city's resources." Harper's mind raced. "Do we have any leads?" "A few," Reyes replied. "But we'll need to move fast. The factions are still in the shadows, but they're already making their move." "Then we'll make ours first," Harper said, her voice hardening with determination. "We'll cut them off at the source. We need to expose them, take back, control before they can do any real damage." The next few days were a blur of planning, strategy and action. Harper's days were filled with meetings with her closest allies, while Reyes and the military executed precision operations to eliminate key figures in the underground movement. The streets were tense, the citizens nervous, but Harper refused to let fear take hold. She addressed the city over the broadcast systems, assuring them that the chaos was not their fault and that the new government would remain strong despite the attempted sabotage from within. And then, the final confrontation. came. It wasn't a large-scale battle, but a series of carefully coordinated strikes at the heart of the remaining factions. Harper stood at the forefront, watching as the military swept through the city, taking down key figures and neutralizing threats with surgical precision. It wasn't easy, and there were casualties on both sides, but as the last of the conspirators fell, Harper could breathe a sigh of relief. The city was theirs, again. But this time it was different. This victory was not just over an external enemy, but over the temptation to return to old ways. The rising sun cast a pale light over the city as Harper stood at the balcony of the command tower, staring out over the streets below. It was a sight she had seen countless times before, but now it felt different, quieter, more fragile, as if the city itself were holding its breath, waiting to see what would come next. The events of the past weeks had left their mark on everyone. The battle, the betrayal, the sacrifices, it had all taken a toll not just on the body but on the spirit. Harper felt the weight of that toll more than anyone. A soft voice broke her thoughts. "You've been staring at that view for hours, Harper." Turned to see Reyes approaching, her face somber but resolute. She was still in her military uniform, her hair tied back in a tight ponytail, but there was an air of exhaustion about her, one that mirrored Harper's own. "I've been thinking," Harper said, her voice low, "about everything. The revolution, Jax's betrayal, the people we lost, the people we still have." Reyes raised an eyebrow, stepping closer. "That's a lot to process." "It is," Harper agreed, "but I keep coming back to one thing. The revolution was never about power. It was about something deeper. It was about creating a world where people didn't have to live in fear, where they didn't have to choose between survival and dignity. And somewhere along the way we lost that focus. I lost that focus." Reyes placed a hand on her shoulder, her grip firm but comforting. "You can't carry the weight of everything on your own, Harper. We all made mistakes. But you've done more than anyone could have imagined. We have a chance to rebuild, to make it right." Harper's gaze drifted back to the city, the morning light bathing the buildings in a soft glow. "But how do we rebuild after all this? After everything we've been through?" Reyes gave a small, knowing smile, one step at a time. Harper nodded, the weight in her chest easing just a little. She had learned over the past weeks that leadership wasn't about having all the answers. It was about being willing to move forward even when the future was unclear. It was about trust, about relying on the people around her, and about knowing that no matter how hard things got, they would face it together. The two women stood in silence for a moment, the distant hum of the city below the only sound. Then Reyes spoke again, her voice practical. "There's still a lot to do. We need to stabilize the economy, ensure the military doesn't slip back into old habits, and most importantly, we need to start rebuilding the people's faith in us." Harper turned to face her, feeling the responsibility settle back on her shoulders. "You're right, and we need to bring the people into this process. This can't be just another top-down decision. They have to see that they have a stake in this new future. We need to empower them, let them rebuild their communities, their homes. Only then will we truly succeed." Reyes nodded, her expression hardening with determination. "We'll make it happen, together." Later that day, Harper stood before a crowd of thousands in the central square, the city's most iconic landmark towering behind her. The air was thick with anticipation, the murmurs of the crowd echoing across the open space. It was the first time she had spoken to the people since the betrayal had been exposed and the last of the conspirators eliminated. They had been through so much, but now Harper had to find a way to reassure them, to bring them back from the edge of doubt. The crowd fell silent as Harper stepped forward, the wind tugging at her jacket. She could feel their eyes on her, the weight of their expectations pressing down on her. But she was ready, she had to be. "I know the past few weeks have been difficult," Harper began, her voice carrying across the square. "I know that. Many of you are still uncertain about the future. We've been through a lot, betrayals, losses, moments of fear. But we are here today because of something far greater than any of that. We are here because we believe in a future that is worth fighting for. A future where our children, our grandchildren will be able to live without fear. A future where no one is above the law, where no one is left behind." She paused, scanning the faces in the crowd. the faces of people who had fought, struggled, and endured. They were the heart of the revolution, and they needed to hear this message. I know we have made mistakes. I know we are not perfect. But I promise you this, we will rebuild together. We will rebuild a government that is by the people, for the people. We will make sure that no one can ever take what we've built from us, and we will never forget the price that has been paid for our freedom. The crowd began to stir, some nodding, others clapping, and a few even starting to chant. Harper's heart swelled with emotion, but she held it together, her voice steady as she continued. This is not the end of the journey, it's just the beginning. We have the power to shape the future, but only if we work together. We have the power to create a world where no one has to fight for survival, where every person can live with dignity and hope. And that, my friends, is what we will do. The crowd erupted in applause, the sound reverberating through the square. For the first time in what felt like forever, Harper felt a glimmer of hope. The future was still uncertain, but she knew they had a chance, a real chance. As the applause continued, Harper allowed herself a brief moment of relief. They had made it through the worst of it. The battle was over. But the real work was just beginning. Later that evening, as Harper sat in her office, surrounded by reports and plans for the rebuilding process, she reflected on what had just happened. The people had rallied behind her, but she knew that was just the first step. They had to prove they could follow through. They had to create a society that was truly free from the corruption and fear that had once ruled them. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Reyes entered, holding a cup of coffee in her hand. "I don't think I've ever seen you give a speech like that before," Reyes said with a slight smile. "You've got the people's trust. Now we just need to keep it." Harper accepted the coffee with a small smile. "One step at a time." "Exactly, and I think we're ready for the next one." Harper's gaze drifted to the window, where the last rays of the sun were slipping beneath the horizon. The city was quiet now, at peace, for the moment. But there was still much to do, and this time they wouldn't be doing it alone. As the sky darkened, Harper made a silent promise to herself. They would rebuild not just the city, but the trust, the hope, and the unity that had been lost. They would create a future worthy of the sacrifices made. The dawn broke with a crisp chill in the air, a reminder that the world was still turning despite the chaos that had nearly torn it apart. Harper sat at her desk, a stack of reports before her. The city, though filled with promise after the revolution, was still far from stable. The rebel factions, while temporarily subdued, were simmering beneath the surface, waiting for an opportunity to regain control. Foreign governments were looking on, waiting to see if the new leadership would last. Even the people, who had rallied behind her so fervently just days before, were beginning to ask questions. Harper rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of leadership press on her shoulders once again. She had no illusions about what was at stake. This wasn't just about holding power. This was about ensuring the survival of the ideals they had fought for, and for that, she needed to keep the fragile unity that had been formed from collapsing. The door creaked open and Rhea stepped inside, her expression as serious as ever. "Morning." Harper greeted her without looking up, her fingers tracing the lines of the papers in front of her. Reyes nodded, closing the door behind her. "We have a problem, or rather several problems." Harper looked up, her face steely. "What happened?" "First off, the remnants of the old guard are starting to regroup. We've intercepted communications from former officials plotting a return to power. They're already rallying support from some of the military factions and wealthy businessmen." Harper frowned. This was something she had anticipated, but hoped would remain in the background for a while longer. "How much support do they have?" "Enough to cause a stir. Not enough for a full-on insurrection yet, but they're gaining momentum. They have the resources, and they're calling for a public demonstration next week." "And the people?" Harper asked, her gaze narrowing. "Are they with us or them?" Reyes hesitated. "It's hard to say. They're not entirely on our side, but they're not ready to throw in with the old regime either. We need to show them that we can be trusted, that we can deliver on our promises." Harper stood, walking over to the window and gazing out at the city. The morning sun was still low in the sky, casting long shadows on the streets below. It was quiet now, but she knew that peace was fragile. One spark could set everything ablaze again. She turned back to Reyes. "What do you suggest?" Reyes paced for a moment, thinking. "We need to demonstrate our strength, but we can't be seen as authoritarian. The last thing we want is to alienate the people we've already gained support from. If we crack down too hard, it will play right into the hands of the rebels." Harper nodded, her mind racing. They had to act swiftly but delicately. The support of the people was the cornerstone of the revolution's success, and they couldn't afford to lose it now. "Set up a meeting with the council," Harper said decisively. "We need to unite the factions that are still loyal to us, make sure they know what's at stake. Then we need to organize a public forum, a show of strength without violence. We need the people to see that we can protect them, but without turning into what we've replaced." Reyes raised an eyebrow. "You think that will work?" Harper smiled grimly. "It has to." The public forum took place 2 days later, in the grand square where Harper had given her first speech to the people after the revolution. It was fitting that this would be the place to prove to them that their fight had not been in vain. The square was filled to capacity, with people standing in every corner, their faces eager and apprehensive. The atmosphere was electric, charged with tension. This was their first real test, the first real chance for Harper and her leadership. To prove that they could stand strong without betraying the trust they had earned, Harper stepped onto the stage, her eyes sweeping across the crowd. She could feel the pressure weighing down on her. This wasn't just a speech, it was the beginning of the next phase of their fight. The people had put their faith in her, but trust was something that had to be earned every single day. They were watching to see if she would fulfill the promises she had made. The crowd fell silent as she approached the podium, the buzz of anticipation replaced by stillness. Harper cleared her throat, her voice calm but strong. "Today we face a challenge not from our enemies on the outside, but from the doubts within. We know that the path we walk is not an easy one. The revolution we fought for, together, was never going to be easy. But it was worth it, because it was never just about overthrowing a system. It was about creating a world where we don't just survive, but thrive." The crowd listened intently, hanging on every word. Harper could feel their uncertainty, their hope, their fear. She had to show them that she believed in this just as much as they did. "But we are not here to rule over you," she continued. "We are here to lead, to rebuild, and to create something better than what we had before. And I know, as I stand here, that you have every right to question us, to question me. You've seen power corrupt, you've seen betrayal, and you've seen suffering. But I promise you this, we are not like those who came before us." Harper paused, allowing her words to sink in. "We are not here to turn the world upside down and take what is not ours. We are here to give you a chance to live, without fear, a chance to stand on your own feet and build the future we all deserve. But we cannot do it alone. We need you." She took a step forward, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. "We are in this together. And we will not let the forces of division, fear, or greed tear us apart. This is our moment, and we will make it count." The crowd erupted into applause, the tension in the air dissipating slightly. Harper felt a sense of relief, but it was short-lived. The battle for unity was far from over. As the applause died down, a voice from the back of the crowd rose up, challenging her. "And what about the old regime?" the man shouted. "What about those who've betrayed us? Will they go unpunished?" The crowd murmured in agreement, some nodding, others shouting their discontent. Harper's heart skipped a beat. This was the moment that could define everything. She couldn't afford to make the wrong move. Harper took a deep breath, meeting the man's gaze with calm determination. "There will be justice," she said, her voice firm. "But justice doesn't mean revenge. It means holding people accountable for their actions and ensuring that those who have wronged us will never have the chance to do so again. We will rebuild this society with fairness, not vengeance." The crowd was quiet for a moment, absorbing her words. Then, slowly, a murmur of agreement rippled through the masses. Harper could see that they were beginning to understand. This wasn't about settling old scores, it was about building something new, something better. As the forum ended, Harper walked off the stage, her mind racing. The test had been passed, but barely. There were still many battles to fight. But, for the first time in days, she felt a sense of cautious optimism. They could do this, they had to, the city was on edge. The streets that had once pulsed with the hopeful energy of revolution now throbbed with a palpable fear. Harper could feel it in the air. A storm was coming, and this time it wasn't just a threat from the shadows. The old guard had rallied their forces, and they were prepared to make their move. The final confrontation was upon them. Harper stood in the war room, the hum of machinery and the low murmur of her council members filling the space. The large screen in front of her displayed images of the city's perimeter, military positions, and reports of insurgents gathering in the outskirts. The rebels had finally taken action, launching a coordinated attack on several key points in the city. They knew this was their last chance to regain power, and they would stop at nothing to succeed. "Are the defenses in place?" Harper asked, her voice calm but with a steely edge. She needed to focus. Panic would serve no one. Reyes nodded from across the room. "We've fortified every district we can. The army is mobilized, and our loyalists are on standby. But they're hitting us from all sides, and it's only a matter of time before they try to break through." Harper's mind raced. She had never anticipated that it would come to this, an all-out war for the future of the revolution, but she couldn't back down now, not after everything they had fought for. The people had put their faith in her, and she couldn't let them down. The choice was clear. They either stood together or they fell apart. "We have one shot at this," Harper said, her eyes narrowing in determination. "We need to show the people we're not just fighting for power, we're fighting for the future. We need to take the fight to them, not hide behind walls. If we can turn the tide, we can win this. But we need every person who believes in what we stand for." Reyes looked at her, understanding the weight of her words. "You're right, but it's going to be a tough battle." Harper stood tall, her expression resolute. "Tough is the only thing we know how to handle." The streets of the city were eerily quiet as night fell, the calm before the storm. The glow of streetlights cast long shadows, and the occasional sound of distant gunfire echoed in the air. Harper moved quickly through the darkened streets, flanked by her most trusted allies. The final attack was imminent, and she had to be there to lead her people, to inspire them to keep fighting. As they approached the central square, Harper's mind raced. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a battle for control. This was about proving that the ideals of the revolution could survive. They were fighting not just against a corrupt system, but against fear, against despair, against everything that had tried to crush them before. The air crackled with tension as Harper and her team took their positions. The rebels were closing in, their forces massing just beyond the city's gates. Harper's gaze was fixed on the horizon, where the first signs of enemy movement could be seen. The sound of marching feet, the crackle of radios, the low murmur of voices. It all seemed to come together in a single moment of realization. This was it. This was the final hour. "Hold your ground," Harper said, her voice unwavering. "We fight for the future. We fight for what we believe in." She could see the resolve in her team's eyes. This wasn't just about winning a war. It was about building a future where they could live without fear of oppression, where they could choose their own path, not have it dictated by those who had only ever seen them as pawns in a game of power. And then, as if on cue, the first shot rang out. The battle had begun. Harper fought with everything she had. Each moment was a blur of gunfire, shouts, and the clash of metal against metal. The sound of explosions reverberated through the streets, and smoke filled the air, blurring the line between friend and foe. But through it all, Harper kept moving. She couldn't afford to stop. Not now. Not when so much was at stake. Her heart pounded in her chest, but her focus remained sharp. She had to reach the central command post, the heart of the old regime's forces. If she could take it, the rest of the battle would be won. The city's future would be secured. As she and her team pushed forward, they encountered fierce resistance. Rebels poured into the streets from every direction, determined to retake the city at any cost. But Harper's team was relentless. They fought with everything they had, each victory fueling their determination. Finally, they reached the command post. Harper stood before the building, breathing heavily, her clothes torn and stained with the grime of battle. She could see the enemy soldiers inside waiting for them. This was it, the moment that would decide everything. Harper took a deep breath, steeling herself. She had come too far to fail now. "On my signal," she said, her voice steady. "We—" "Move in, no hesitation." She counted to 3 and then, without warning, she led the charge. The sound of gunfire filled the air as they stormed the building, pushing the rebels back. It was a brutal, bloody fight, but Harper's team was resolute. They would not be stopped. In the chaos, Harper spotted the leader of the enemy faction, a man who had once been a key figure in the old regime. He was standing at the back of the room, barking orders to his soldiers. Harper's eyes narrowed. This was the man who had caused so much destruction, so much pain, and now he would pay for it. With a surge of adrenaline, Harper pushed forward, cutting through the remaining soldiers. She reached the leader, her eyes filled with fury and resolve. "You've lost," she said, her voice low and dangerous. The man sneered, his hands raised in surrender. "You think you've won? You think you can change anything?" Harper's expression hardened. "I don't think. I know." With a swift motion, she incapacitated him, ensuring that he would never threaten the people again. The battle raged on for hours, but slowly the tide began to turn. The rebels, leaderless and fractured, started to retreat. The people who had once feared this day began to rise up, joining the revolutionaries in their fight for freedom. It was a moment of triumph, one that would be remembered for generations. The final echoes of gunfire faded into the night. Harper stood amidst the ruins of the battle. Her body ached, her heart heavy with the loss and sacrifice that had brought them here. But there was no time for mourning, not yet. They had won, but the work was just beginning. She turned to Reyes, who was standing nearby, surveying the aftermath. "It's over," Harper said, her voice barely above a whisper. Reyes nodded, though her face remained somber. "It's over, but the real work, building the future, is just beginning." Harper looked out over the city, a mixture of exhaustion and determination settling over her. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but the true challenge now lay ahead. They had won the battle, but they had to win the peace. And that would require more than just strength. It would require wisdom, compassion, and a commitment to the ideals that had started it all. And Harper was ready for that fight. The revolution was over, but the real journey was just beginning.